Wow, good golly gosh, it's been a really long time. Are we all here? Peter, are you here? What are you drinking?
I'm here and I'm drinking water
Water. Why?
because I'm trying to be healthy.
Weak. Right. Aaron, are you here?
Yes, of course.
What are you drinking?
Wine, white wine.
White wine. Lovely. Very good. And I am drinking, what is it? Club soda with a forest of mint, which is lovely. It's been quite the time since our last video. That is for a couple of reasons. One, Aaron is pretty forthright in his views, which proved to be quite controversial. We had many a word about that afterwards, but I decided not to censor him because I think one of the most valuable things about Aaron is his views, and I'm not going to start burning the books of his thoughts. So beyond that, we also had another failed attempt at recording, which was eventually resolved by a BT OpenReach engineer on my behalf because my internet kept cutting out. Moreover, we've also been allowed out our houses. So I think a lot of us have spent time in the pub, as we should, or bars really, reclaiming Soho. But we are back for this recording, and my good golly gosh, if you could have heard what we said before we started recording, it would have, it would have been enough to end even the most right-wing, fervent, entertaining chap's career. Way worse than anything that Milo Yiannopoulos has said, but now we will try and keep it civil, won't we, Aaron?
I'd hate to tell you this, but I didn't come up with the inappropriate comment. That was Peter, remember?
Oh yeah, that was Peter. Peter is
So
filth.
please correct that on the record, because I wasn't the one. You know, for once, the most right-wing person in this panel is not the one who came up with that.
No, fair enough. Peter was the filthy one. Anyway, the first thing that we want to talk about is masks. Wearing masks, very trendy, 2020 hot trend, like knocking over a statue while wearing a mask. You couldn't be more on trend if you were appearing in Vogue, but you'd have to be black to do that, apparently, on their latest issue, which only features black people. Interesting. What do we think about masks? Is it a terrible infringement of our civil rights to have to wear damp cloth in front of our face, according to Peter Hitchens, or is this a sensible precaution that keeps us all good? What do we think about this? Any thoughts? Put your hands up, please. Aaron, go.
Okay. Ironically enough, I actually do not have that much of a problem with it. Only because of the fact that we need to make some sacrifices, and we know. Okay, let's backtrack a bit. We know what spreads the coronavirus. We know that it spread. It's quite contagious because of air. Quite contagious through the air, especially when you're in close proximity with people. And one of the ways that we can actually mitigate this is by actually wearing a mask, especially when we live in a city like London, where we have quite a high population density, and it's practically impossible to actually maintain social distancing with one another, especially if you're walking down the streets or going into your chemist or going into your groceries or whatnot, or living your everyday life. So I think that it is actually quite, I mean, personally, I actually do not have any problems with this. However, I must say that it is going to be a little bit of a slippery slope. And I know that, you know, the logic behind this is that on why people disagree with having or this policy to compulsory allow have people wear masks is because of the fact that it's an infringement on people's civil liberties, which we obviously need to balance with the greater good. Because of course, if you know, for instance, someone like myself, I really don't need to wear a mask, but if I actually spread COVID to someone who is 70 years old or is at high risk, then I'm definitely jeopardizing their life. So this is what we need to balance. But I think that the greater issue in this is basically the slippery slope, which is, you know, where does it stop? Does it stop with masks? Does it stop with with a curfew, which is being implemented in countries like Belgium and Australia at the moment? Does it start with locking, restricting us to our postcode? So, like for instance, I live in New Cross. So, am I not, should we restrict everyone from New Cross should we not allow people from New Cross to go outside of New Cross and just stay there? Which is what they've been doing in other countries as well, like Australia. So this is, I think, so I think for me, this is where the gray area is that, how much do we put up with, and how much of this infringement into our civil liberties do we put up with?
I mean, I think that's fine to be concerned about these things. I mean, the original point, masks, I don't really have too much of an issue with. But yes, how far does it go on for? And over the weekend, we recorded 8 deaths of COVID disease. I mean, 5 people were shot in London. So, I mean, there's a lot of other things out there that seem to be a bit more deadly now, particularly suicide amongst men, probably because their livelihoods have been taken away from them and they're going to have their homes repossessed soon. Anyway, Peter, any thoughts? Do you mind wearing a mask?
I don't necessarily mind wearing a mask.
I mean, Peter lives in the suburbs. So he lives in the suburbs. He's out in the countryside, basically. He has a car. Unbelievable. I can't even imagine. I'm here only armed with an Oyster card. Peter, how often do you actually need to put on a mask on?
Actually, well, it's basically whenever you go to a shop, isn't it? So it's a couple of times a week. And it was not the nicest experience wandering around Waitrose, of course, with a mask on.
Of course.
Because, yeah, they're not very pleasant. But I completely understand that the research so far has shown that they obviously do reduce the spread of COVID and that they're a good thing. I think I kind of agree with Aaron in terms of the method by which they're trying to enforce it is I don't necessarily agree with. I don't think it's the best approach to just tell people and then punish them if they don't do it, instead of actually explaining to them the situation, like, by not wearing it, yeah, you are probably going to you could kill someone, essentially. And I think that's the problem maybe with a lot of the measures that the government has taken so far with this and possibly into the future, where they're more just imposing edicts on us and telling us that we have to do this and that, otherwise we're going to face fines, which I don't necessarily agree with. And I think as well, when you add to it the fact that when do we know this is going to be over? Like, it kind of feels like it's over a little bit now, but it's not still. And then there's an indefinite, like, when are you going to be able to go on the tube without a mask on? When are you going to be able to go to your, like, corner shop without a mask on? Like, is that ever going to happen?
Quite. When are people going to be stop being scared of this disease? And as Aaron said, I mean, a very valid point, what happens in the future here? Because we've already seen in this country lockdowns in the north of England the day before Eid, which was quite an inconvenience for Muslim families, I imagine. Although I imagine that the take-up of the 3-hour notice of you cannot visit anyone was probably not very well observed. I mean, where do we think we will be in a couple of weeks on from this? We've seen that we've got to go into self-imposed quarantine unless it's absolutely necessary that we go out, so whatever that means, if we come back from somewhere like Spain. What does that actually mean for international travel? What does that actually mean for how the government will treat areas of the country? And it also led me to a terrifying conclusion to agree with Sadiq Khan, of all people, that London shouldn't be locked down, when the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, this famous unearned libertarian, was claiming to build a ring of steel around London, the M25 belt, to wall us in or wall the rest of the UK out. I mean, it's all a bit scary. I mean, what do you think, Aaron? Where will this go?
That's kind of like what's a bit like, that whole idea behind, like, walling London. I'm quite sure that wasn't that like in a movie somewhere. I think it must be like that movie Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies or something like that, where they walled the city of.
I must have missed that one. Sorry.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it was just very synonymous about a movie that I saw. I just can't remember off the top of my head what that is. But I think I think you're right. I think personally, one thing that scares me about that is that, is this, as I mentioned, it's a slippery slope into almost like a police state. And don't say that we're not that, we're far away from that, because just remember that, our Belgian friends across the channel, they currently have a curfew at the moment, so they can't actually go out of their house. They can't be out of their houses by 11 p.m. And between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. each day. In Australia, it's even worse. It's from 8 p.m. until 6 a.m. The next morning, and so and to make matters worse, in Australia, you can't actually be be further than 5 kilometers away from your house. So it's literally almost like you're a prisoner within your own city. So this is, I
Probably
think,
not literally, but yes, I take your point.
yeah, but I guess that, do you really want your rights to be infringed like that? Like, how would you like it if you can't move out of my land, Simon? Peter, how would you like it if you can't go further from I don't know where you live, but insert name of your suburb here, Peter. I think it's an awful thing, and it's an awful thing to to go to, and I think that's probably my main concern about where we're heading with this, to be perfectly honest with you.
It is a worry, which I want to go on to the next topic, which is government performance. I've written that down. That's pretty loose as a concept. I'm just wondering, can we actually discern what the philosophy of the government is here? Because there's been many contradictory policies coming out of the government recently. We could go back and talk about the scandal of the old people's care homes and discharging those patients from hospital, sending the virus directly into the most vulnerable sections of society. That was a government decision based on Healthcare England, I believe, which is a slightly dubious organization, which I have my doubts about. And then we saw Boris Johnson relying on the advice of experts against his libertarian instincts. But then as we move forward, the government has got itself into a flap about how much we will weigh while giving us £10 off any restaurant meal we have on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which also includes restaurants such as McDonald's, using restaurant in the loosest term there. So do we not find that the government is slightly confused? I'm a bit concerned I'm not seeing a train of thought going through the government. I'm also concerned that this Conservative government is seeking to stimulate the economy by giving us more money rather than cutting taxes. Do we have any thoughts on the coherence of the government and Boris Johnson's performance as Prime Minister in what will definitely be the biggest crisis of his career? Any thoughts? Yeah, Peter, go.
So I think that I was reading something today where people were trying to argue that they're doing it on purpose to confuse the matter and make it seem like it's the public that aren't understanding things and it's the public's fault and not their fault, which I guess you could give them credit for, but I'm not sure if that's really the case.
It's a bit of three-dimensional, well, that's five-dimensional chess by the point you got at that, isn't it?
Yeah. Whereas I think it just feels more than anything that they really don't know what they're doing. They're basically just trying to gauge it from public opinion. So I think the mask thing was quite telling, where you had Michael Gove come out and say the weekend before that it wasn't going to happen and all this kind of stuff, and then a few days later they said it was. So either that means they literally only decided within that couple of days, or they don't tell Michael Gove anything, or maybe they were just trying to play the PR game of seeing what happens if we say no, what happens if we say yes, what's the thing that's basically going to win us the most brownie points with people. And worryingly, that seems to be the only consistent thing in the whole of this, which is how do we win the PR game?
Well, that's a time-honored tradition of government, isn't it? To fly a kite and see how people react to it. Say this, say that, see which one focus group bests, if you understand my meaning, and then work out from there where you're going to go, which doesn't seem like a terribly good government with convictions, which is, I think, probably what we want at this moment. Are we adopting a libertarian model where it's up to you to take charge of your own personal health, or are we operating in under an authoritarian scheme where you're not even allowed to buy Snickers at a checkout? What's the policy here? Aaron, what do you think? You must love this government, this Brexiteer government. What do you think of how they're handling this? And indeed Brexit, the ongoing scenario. Also, I just point out that a huge car jam on the road down to Dover doesn't look so terrifying now. I mean, this has really sort of solidified Brexit into the background, which is pretty amazing.
Okay, I'll start with the point that you made. So I'll touch on Brexit in a bit. So just in terms of the pub, so giving I think it's a 50% discount up to £10, if memory serves me correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a good idea? Is it a good idea? Well, the purpose of that policy is to effectively help boost the effectively the hospitality industry, which struggled for the past 3 months because of the lockdown. So I understand the underlying principle and policy here. And to answer your question, Simon, about shouldn't we just give people a tax break? That's only going to help you if you're like myself, who's actually working. But if you're not actually working, like most people in the hospitality industry, a tax break isn't really going to do them much good at the most. So you know what? I probably should say that in my own greedy way that yes, it should be it should be a tax break rather than a handout of £10 or whatever it might be. But the sensible part of me understands where this despite the fact that I'm quite a right-wing conservative, the sensible part of me actually does see what the policy of this is meant to propagate. Now, in terms of in terms of forcing people and what to spend this in, here's an idea. If you're fat, get a salad. No one's forcing you to eat steak. No one's forcing you to eat pork. No one's forcing you to get chips. If you're worried about your health, use that money to actually get a salad. So. And I'm sure you'll enjoy it. So moving on, in terms of how do I think the government's actually dealing with the coronavirus situation? I believe that the verdict's still out in that. But I do think that the government is doing the best that it can based on the information that it has at hand. And the problem, and I think I touched on this in the previous video that we did. If you look at all of the governments around the world and compare them with each other, a lot of them are making these decisions based on the information that they have and the facts and their knowledge of their individual countries. Okay, there is no silver bullet here. There is no no policy or process that's guaranteed to work and work for any country, save their economy and all that. So each government needs to make a decision as to what they deem is important and how they balance the risk versus the opportunity.
You don't find it quite a scattergun approach that's going on?
I don't think it's a scattergun approach. I mean, I think I can see the logic behind this, but I think what people want is a clear roadmap as to how we're going to get out of this. But that's nothing that no government has actually provided that clear roadmap anywhere in the world, because of the fact that they've been reacting to the amount of cases that they get, the changes in the economy and so on and so forth. So this is what I mean. It's like it's not like they can basically say that, okay, you know what, here's a 6-month plan. This is how we're going to get out of it. We don't have that. We have a 3-week plan, if at all. And I think that that's fair enough, because it is a very unpredictable virus. What can you do? Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. We're running out of time here. I've got a little countdown, which is exciting. My thoughts on that are just that I want a conservative government that governs in a conservative way. I want to see tax cuts. I mean, perhaps this is the time for radical overhaul of the tax system, like getting rid of corporation tax almost altogether. If we have a clean Brexit or a no-deal Brexit, however you want to phrase it, Aaron, that would be an option on the table for us. I don't know if the EU would denounce us as a social pariah, but similarly, people like Priti Patel, who's touted as this huge bitch of government, is failing to get a grip of the migrant situation, of migrants coming over the channel in dinghies, which people seem pretty irate about as well. And I get the sense from this government that their ideological antennae is not helping them forge a path. That's just my thoughts on that. The last comment I had was any reflections on Black Lives Matter, but I think I could actually streamline this because we're so pushed for time here. It has been a previous assertion on the show that we thought that Trump was a shoo-in for the electorate in November. How do we feel about that now? He's got a bit of a flap on, hasn't he, about various things. He's had a bit of a failed, how would we call it, conference thing, a rally, didn't work out well for him. Also, he's now upset about mail-in ballots, even though that would be the safest option in a pandemic. I am a bit dubious and less sure in my conviction that he will win. I don't underestimate that there is a possibility, but also I don't feel the momentum is with him, and I think it's an habitual, almost terminal slide now for him, despite his press secretary's outstanding efforts. Anyway, Peter, any thoughts?
Well, I guess it does seem a little bit more shaky than what it was maybe prior to this whole pandemic situation. I still don't necessarily trust that he's not going to somehow pull through, because he's very unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel that if he does manage to get in, then we're probably starting to see what the next 4 years are going to be like, as he slowly starts to lose control of the situation a little bit more.
He certainly doesn't look in control of any of the situations that are currently buffeting America, who has performed extremely badly in this COVID issue. Aaron, biggest Trump fan on the planet, what do you think?
If you recall, maybe for exactly 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton had a 98% chance of winning the presidency.
Mm-hmm.
And the odds of if you actually put 10 pounds on Donald Trump, you would have got 300 pounds in return, I believe, if memory serves me correctly. So I just remember, it's really funny because I always recall this quote, because obviously post-election, the media was lamenting. It was lamenting. It's like, how could the polls be wrong? How could we get this wrong? By the way, they were wrong about Brexit as well. They were wrong about, and even previous to that, they were wrong about the Conservative election, which is the David Cameron one. They were wrong about Brexit, and they were wrong about Trump. So there was a lot of things that the polls were wrong about, by the way. And so anyway, people were lamenting about that. Well, how could this happen? And then, one very smart, I think it's Tommy Lahren actually, basically said something along the lines of, the reason why the polls are wrong is because the polls never get the conservative Republicans. And the reason why they don't get the conservative Republicans is because we have jobs. We don't sit by the phone. We actually have to go to work, and we don't field stupid alleys like that. So this is why I think that, look, polls wise, I really don't care about polls at the moment, because at the end of the day, as I said, they haven't been accurate for the past 4 years so far. They've been wrong about everything. So I don't think that's going to I don't pay much attention to that at all. But I think it's also unfair that you don't think that that you think that Trump is actually handling the whole COVID situation inappropriately, because that just shows how misinformed you guys are. And I'd hate to say this, but the reason why he is actually the reason why there's no it's a bit messy in the US at the moment in terms of handling of COVID is because of the fact that it's actually left to the states. So you have effectively 50 different governments making 50 different policies about COVID and how they're going to deal with this. So Florida has a different way of dealing with Texas, and Texas has a different way of dealing with it in California, and so on and so forth. And just to point out, by the way, those are ones that aren't dealing with this are mainly Democrat-run states and cities, like Chicago. So
I take your point, Aaron. I think that we could probably draw a graph of a country that enjoys maximum amount of freedom handling this poorly. I think that Britain is probably the freest country in Europe, and it has handled it the worst, arguably. And I think America is probably one of the freest countries on earth, and they've handled it in some ways the worst.
No.
And to take you up on the polling, yes, that's why we have elections, to test the validity of our polls. Anyway, I mean,
all I'm saying, Simon, is that the comment that Trump isn't handling this well is very unfair and unfounded, because you're talking about it's not the American system is not a unitary system like the UK, where power is centralized in Westminster. It's very disparate. So it's not fair to actually say that Trump's not handling this well. If there was a war in America and America got invaded, then yes, that falls squarely within Trump's hands. But this isn't.
Okay, I take your point. The only path I see for Trump to win is if there's a wholehearted rejection of the politicization of race, which is something that I'd be quite keen on. I think it's very interesting, and I mentioned it earlier, this copy of Vogue magazine, where all the photographers, models, and editors, writers are black for this upcoming issue of Vogue. But
God,
I
can't
would
wait
think
to
that
have
would be an interesting experiment in and of itself, and would make for an interesting magazine article or issue. But as it falls into the politicization of race, I'm a bit more dubious. And I'm hoping that there is a rejection of that. And that's something that I would back him for. We will hopefully get to pick this up again. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to click the end button now. Do you want to say goodbye, Peter?
Goodbye.
Do you want to say goodbye, Aaron?
Bye.
Okay, goodbye, everyone.